Long ago, in the bustling heart of Baghdad, there lived a man whose wit was as sharp as a desert wind and whose laughter was as infectious as the morning sun. His name was Abu Nawas, and he was known far and wide, not for his wealth, but for his incredible ability to find humor in the most difficult situations. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, walked through the vibrant market stalls. People would stop and greet him, hoping to hear a clever remark or a funny observation about the day's events. The city of Baghdad was a place of wonders, filled with the scent of exotic spices and the sound of trade. Yet it was Abu Nawas who was its most famous resident. He lived simply, finding joy in the small ironies of life and the peculiar behavior of his fellow citizens. In this introduction, we see the foundation of a legend who would forever change the way people thought about logic and trickery.
Grand palace of the Caliphate, King Harun al-Rashid sat upon his ornate throne, feeling a deep sense of boredom that even his finest musicians could not cure. The king, a regal man with a thick black beard, golden crown, and ornate silk royal robes, looked out over his kingdom and sighed, searching for something that could truly challenge his mind. He enjoyed the company of poets and scholars, but he especially enjoyed the clever games he played with Abu Nawas, his favorite jester and advisor. The king wanted to test Abu Nawas once again, to see if there was any task so absurd that the clever man could not find a way out of it. He began to brainstorm the most ridiculous challenge he could imagine, something that defied the laws of nature and common sense. The atmosphere in the palace was tense as the advisors whispered about what the king might be planning next. Everyone knew that when the king was bored, someone was bound to be put to the test, and that someone was almost always Abu Nawas.
A royal messenger was dispatched to the humble home of Abu Nawas, carrying an urgent summons to the palace. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, received the news with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He knew that an invitation from the king was often a double-edged sword, filled with both prestige and potential peril. He straightened his robe, adjusted his turban, and followed the guard through the winding streets toward the towering gates of the palace. As he entered the grand hall, the silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of his own footsteps echoing against the polished marble. The courtiers watched him pass, wondering what fate awaited him this time. Abu Nawas kept a polite smile on his face, but his mind was already racing, preparing for the intellectual duel that was about to take place. He bowed deeply before the king, ready to face whatever madness the monarch had prepared.
The king leaned forward, a mischievous glint in his eyes, and announced the challenge that would baffle anyone else. He declared that Abu Nawas must teach a donkey how to read a book within exactly 40 days, or face a significant punishment for his supposed arrogance. The courtiers gasped at the impossibility of the task, for everyone knows that a donkey is a stubborn animal with no interest in literature. King Harun al-Rashid, a regal man with a thick black beard, golden crown, and ornate silk royal robes, laughed as he watched Abu Nawas's reaction. He expected the clever man to protest or beg for mercy, but Abu Nawas simply stroked his chin in deep thought. After a moment of silence, Abu Nawas looked up and accepted the challenge, much to the shock of everyone present. He requested only a small amount of gold for the educational materials and the full 40 days to complete the work. The king was delighted, believing he had finally trapped Abu Nawas in a corner from which there was no escape.
Abu Nawas returned home leading the donkey by a rope, his expression calm despite the monumental task ahead. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, tied the animal in his courtyard and began to prepare. He didn't look worried. Instead, he looked like a man with a secret plan that was just beginning to unfold.
His neighbors watched from their windows, whispering about how Abu Nawas had finally lost his mind by promising to educate a beast of burden. The donkey, oblivious to its new role as a scholar, simply stood there chewing on a piece of straw. Abu Nawas brought out a large, thick book with heavy pages and placed it on a wooden stand in front of the animal. He knew that the key to any successful trick was patience and a deep understanding of how his audience and his subject perceived reality. The first few days were spent simply getting the donkey accustomed to the presence of the book and the sound of Abu Nawas's voice.
The real training began behind closed doors, where Abu Nawas revealed his clever strategy. He began placing thin layers of delicious barley and grain between the pages of the large book. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, watched as the donkey quickly learned a new trick. To get to the food, the donkey had to use its tongue and nose to flip the pages one by one, searching for every last grain. Every morning and every evening, Abu Nawas would practice this with the donkey, ensuring the animal became faster and more efficient at turning the pages. To an outside observer, it would look as if the donkey was intently searching for information on each page. Abu Nawas smiled to himself, knowing that he wasn't teaching the donkey to read language, but he was certainly teaching it to read the opportunity for a snack. The donkey became quite skilled, its ears twitching with focus every time the book was opened.
As the weeks passed, the news of the reading donkey spread throughout Baghdad, reaching even the furthest corners of the empire. People were skeptical, but the confidence Abu Nawas displayed made them wonder if some magic was at play. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, continued his routine without fail. He made sure the donkey was well fed only through the pages of the book, creating a powerful association in the animal's mind. He also began to stop putting grain on the pages for one day, then two, making the donkey more desperate and louder in its search. He was training the donkey to not only turn the pages, but to react when it couldn't find what it was looking for. This part of the plan was crucial for the final performance at the palace. The tension in the city grew as the 40th day approached, with bets being placed on whether Abu Nawas would succeed or fail.
His neighbors, curious and somewhat worried for him, often stopped by to ask for a progress report. Abu Nawas would simply tell them that the donkey was a slow learner, but was starting to grasp the fundamentals of philosophy. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, would laugh at their confused faces. He knew that the more he built up the mystery, the more the king would be intrigued. He spent the final days of the challenge refining the donkey's behavior, ensuring it would flip every single page of the massive book from start to finish. He even dressed the donkey in a small, colorful vest to make it look more like a proper student. Every detail was planned to perfection, from the timing of the donkey's movements to the specific way Abu Nawas would present the situation to the king. He was no longer just a man with a donkey. He was a director preparing for the performance of a lifetime. The morning of the 40th day arrived with a clear sky and a sense of impending drama. Abu Nawas led the donkey through the streets toward the palace, followed by a massive crowd of curious onlookers. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, walked with his head held high and a confident stride. When he reached the grand hall, King Harun al-Rashid was already waiting, surrounded by his entire court of advisors and noblemen. The king, a regal man with a thick black beard, golden crown, and ornate silk royal robes, looked at the donkey and then at Abu Nawas with a skeptical grin. He asked if the education was complete and if the beast was ready to demonstrate its literacy. Abu Nawas bowed and assured the king that the donkey had indeed studied very hard, though its reading style was somewhat unique. The book was placed on the golden pedestal, and a hush fell over the entire room. With the king's permission, Abu Nawas stepped forward and opened the book to the first page. The donkey, having been kept hungry for the last 2 days, immediately began to work. It used its tongue to flip the first page, searching for the grain that it expected to find. When it found nothing, it quickly flipped to the second page, then the third and the fourth. The courtiers watched in absolute silence, their eyes wide with disbelief as they saw the animals seemingly scanning each page with intense focus. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, stood back with his arms crossed, a look of pride on his face. The donkey continued to flip through the entire book, faster and faster, its frustration growing as it failed to find a single grain of barley. To anyone watching, it looked exactly like a scholar searching for a specific passage in a very difficult text. The king was leaning so far forward on his throne that he nearly fell off, captivated by the sight.
As the donkey reached the final page and realized there was no food to be found, it let out a loud, long, and incredibly frustrated bray. Hee-haw! 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 The sound echoed through the marble halls, startling the guards and making the king jump. The donkey began to stomp its hooves and bray even louder, looking directly at the book and then at Abu Nawas. The king looked confused and asked what the animal was doing. King Harun al-Rashid, a regal man with a thick black beard, golden crown, and ornate silk royal robes, demanded to know why the donkey was making such a terrible noise instead of reading out loud. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, didn't miss a beat. He looked at the king with a perfectly serious expression and began to explain the educational process he had undertaken. He told the king that the donkey had finished reading the entire book, and now it was expressing its opinion on the content.
Abu Nawas explained that the donkey had read every page, but was complaining because it didn't understand a single word. "Your Majesty," Abu Nawas said, "this donkey reads exactly like a person who turns the pages of a book but doesn't understand the meaning behind them. He is frustrated because the book has no substance for him." King Harun al-Rashid, a regal man with a thick black beard, golden crown, and ornate silk royal robes, paused for a moment, processing the logic. Then the absurdity of the situation and the cleverness of the metaphor hit him, and he burst into a thunderous laughter that shook the palace. The king realized that Abu Nawas had technically fulfilled the task by making the donkey interact with the book, while also delivering a profound lesson about the difference between looking at information and truly understanding it. Abu Nawas, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, wearing a modest cream-colored turban, a simple loose brown robe, and a witty sparkle in his eyes, bowed again, knowing he had won the day. The king rewarded him with a bag of gold and allowed him to take the donkey back home. And so, Abu Nawas returned to the streets of Baghdad, not only with his head held high, but also with a heavier purse and a very well-fed donkey. The story of the donkey that read became a favorite tale in the coffee houses and markets, reminding everyone that wit and creativity can overcome even the most impossible demands. The moral of the story is simple. It is better to understand a little than to read a lot without comprehension, and a clever mind is the greatest tool one can possess. We hope you enjoyed this classic tale of Abu Nawas and his legendary humor. If you want to hear more stories of wit and wisdom from the Golden Age, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite Abu Nawas story or what you would have done in his place. Thank you for watching, and remember to always look for the clever way out of any problem. See you in the next adventure.